Music and horses a common subject of Jack B. Yeats's paintings. According to the National Gallery of Ireland, The Singing Horseman from 1949 is one of Yeats's most jubilant paintings. A young man on a large, restless horse clasps his hands together, casts his head back, and sings aloud to the heavens. Eamon Andrews interviewed Jack B. Yeats on Radio Éireann in 1947. Eamon Andrews asked, "What would you say to me now if I were to tell you there are several of your paintings that I just don't understand?" Jack Yeats answered, "There's no book of words, no direction by which you or anyone else can understand all about painting. If there were such a book, it would ring the death knell on painting. I dislike the word art as to painting. There's only one art, and that is the art of living. Painting is an occupation that's in that art, and that occupation is the freest of all the occupations of living. There's no alphabet, no grammar, no rules whatever. Many hopeful sportsmen have tried to invent rules and have always failed. Any person or group of persons who try to live life with rules do a disservice to this occupation of living. They forget that painting is tactics and not strategy. It is carried out in the face of the enemy." Eamon Andrews asked, "Do you have any advice to offer to a young painter?" Jack Yeats answered, For Jack B. Yeats, the world of memories is very important. According to the National Gallery of Ireland, Yeats painted several works of this kind, in which a solitary, elderly figure appears to wander in familiar territory. It seems reasonable to imagine that such figures, aged and reflective, represent the artist himself, revisiting places or past experiences and pondering his current circumstances. Both the title and image might be taken as metaphors for an individual's confrontations with the inevitable advance of time. Yeats has many years enjoyed exploring the world of memory for its emotional and material content. Sligo was a bond for all of the Yeatses. It provided the lore and landscape for W. B. Yeats's earliest work, and for The Man and Echo and The Black Tower. In Flower Girl, Dublin from 1926, male and female figures are juxtaposed and strong social dichotomies are revealed. The Flower Girl approaches a fashionably attired woman outside a lighted shop window. The woman, dressed in red cloche hat and smart evening coat, is obviously of a different social class. Both women are of the same height and they look directly at each other, but the tilt of the woman's head and her rigid expression make clear that she regards the Flower Girl as her inferior. The Flower Girl's subservient expression is sharply observed, and she is forced to negotiate an awkward encounter in order to sell her flowers and thereby to survive. This is modern capitalism at its most basic form. On either side of the Flower Girl and her customer are two male elements. A tall, fashionable figure in a bowler hat stands in the doorway. He maintains his distance while his female companion negotiates with the Flower Girl. he is mirrored on the extreme right by two shadows. According to the National Gallery of Ireland, Grief from 1951 is perhaps Yeats's most powerful expression of his abhorrence of war. It appears to originate from a sketch entitled Let There Be No More War, which the artist made in his last workbook. At the center of the painting, an apocalyptic figure on horseback amidst an angry mob gestures aggressively. In the foreground, an elderly man looks at the blood that drips onto his hands, while a mother places her arm protectively around a small child. Yeats describes a scene of violence and chaos with characteristic economy, vigor, and emotional intensity. According to the National Gallery of Ireland, Yeats was drawn throughout the 1920s to everyday urban activities and fleeting moments, inconsequential in themselves, but an essential element of city life. In Dinner Hour at the Docks from 1928, a docker eats in silence the meal brought to him by his wife, who sits by his side and leans attentively towards him. It is a moment of quiet and respite, but also of human connection. The Liffey Swim records the annual swim down the Liffey, which had been inaugurated 3 years prior to the painting in 1920. As Yeats emphasizes, it had already become a major event in the life of the city. Held in the early evening in late summer, it was aimed at workers who would be free at that time to see the race. Yeats is keen to demonstrate his participation in the event and includes a depiction of himself sketching the scene. He appears in the guise of the flaneur, part of the crowd, exposed to it sensually, and yet removed from it in his role as commentator. Different from other modernist depictions of the city crowds, the Liffey Swim emphasizes a harmonious relationship between the people and their surroundings. The comparatively small scale of the quayside buildings does not obscure the sky and river. Instead, these two natural elements dominate the scene, placing the city and its inhabitants in a secondary role.